Well, hello everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your Critique of the Week. It's Friday, May 5th. So glad you could join me. We are broadcasting from a alternative location in the Woodlands, Texas. I forgot a few things along the way. Hopefully this works and the sound quality is good and everything. I forgot some graphics so it doesn't say the Woodlands, Texas. Also, I forgot a little R logo, but I forgot a few other things too. I'm also using Office Libre instead of Word, so I couldn't figure out a few of the things, but we'll do a good job here. But it's really fun to be here, even on the road, for the Critique of the Week. As always, the goal of the critique is to give that workshop experience. So please do leave your comments in the notes. We're going to do a lightning round this week, which is the easiest thing for me to do. So all you have to do is email poems, anything you want us to look at, to Open Mic. Let me put this up on the screen. It's one of the graphics I forgot was our big splash screen, but I can put the email address down there. Open Mic, it's openmic@rattle.com. This is the link that we use for our open lines on the Rattlecast. But for now, we'll use it for the Critique of the Week. So if you'd like to share a poem, talk about anything, email a poem to openmic, that's openmic@rattle.com, and we will get through as many poems as we can in the next hour. Let's see. So who we got here? And I think I'm gonna switch these around. I think. Maybe not. So I want to see the comments a little closer. We'll go like this. All right. So let's see. Dick Westheimer's here. We got Monica Dobos. We got Ethne Longbottom. We got Monica Dobos. I already said. We got Kim Patton. We got James Langford. D. Coleman. Clayton Clark is here. Tom Barlow is here. Good to see you. Let's see. Over on Facebook, we've got Joe Barca and Sharon Ferrante, Marguerite Doyle. We got Mary Lisa Dominicius. How about that? Hopefully. Andrea Dobrica. We got Jenny Middleton. We've got Katie Dozier from the other side of the house. Good to see you, Katie. All right, so let's get into a critique. Let's see if anybody's emailed me any poems yet. Andrea Dobrica had a poem. Let's see. Yeah, so no poems have come in yet. Oh, Ethne has one already. And Andrea Dobrica had one that we didn't get to last time. The last time we did this was May 31st. I was looking back at my notes. We got another one in from Catherine Patton. So we're going to have some poems here to look at. Let's take a look at Andrea's poem first. This was something she sent May 31st. And let's see here. We'll go to the old PDF view. Okay. So, and sorry, I can't figure out how to get rid of these little... It shows the extra space. I don't like that, but there's nothing I can do to get rid of it right now. I was looking around before the show started. So, the poem is called Poem Called What I Don't Know. A poem called What I Don't Know. Write what you know, only I didn't know much of anything, that is. So I wrote, page full of nothings, dressed them up with bows and ribbons, drenched them in made-up hues of deliberate metaphors, and called them somethings: poems, war cries, mantras, questions. Why, how, when, why? Confusion clumped like elderflowers on my synapses, ripe for the picking, the heaviest bountiful this season, hung heavy on the branches, the gatherers never gathered, all dead, withered back to nothing. What I know. What you don't know can't hurt you. Only it did blindside me, that is. No bliss in the curled up question marks, connected with my solar plexus, rotation halted mid-breath, thrown off axis in the cosmic ditch. What do you call a spinning top with no spin? A toy, broken, useless, nothing. What do I know? So really great voice in that poem, first of all. A poem called What I Don't Know. There's a real intimacy, I'd say, to the it feels, one of the things we always talk about, or often do, is it helps to feel like a poem, think about a poem as you're writing is written as a direct address to somebody, like you're actually talking to someone. And this poem has that kind of feel to it, like somebody is in mind as the receiver of this poem. And then that makes it feel like you as the receiver. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it makes it feel like you, as the receiver of poems, are sort of connected too. So there's that sense of being connected to the poem that really helps a lot. Let's see. Yeah. Just want to make sure everything's running right. Yeah, Katie says, I love no bliss in the curled up questions marks. Yeah. Yeah, some good lines here too. So, so that's what I like first of all about the poem. Let's go sort of line by line through it. Write what you know, only I didn't know much of anything. So this is something, write what you know is advice that people always give, or tend to give writers. And so we start out with that. Write what you know, only I didn't. So there's a good turn off the initial phrase in that second line, only I didn't. And that sort of sets up the poem and propels it forward. So that works really well. Only I didn't know much of anything, that is. So I wrote, page full of nothings. I'd say pages full of nothings, for one thing. Pages full of nothings, because we have, there's the them, and so we're going to the plural. Pages full of nothings, dress them up with bows and ribbons, drench them in made-up hues. I love the made-up hues, too. Drench them in made-up hues of deliberate metaphors and called them somethings, poems. See, I really like this section a lot, too. Dress them up with ribbons. So we go to the visual, which is always something that we like to do. Poems, war cries, mantras, questions. And then I think it loses a little bit of steam right here in this section where, we're dressing up in hues, especially like the made-up hues of deliberate metaphors. I like that. And call them somethings, poems, war cries. I think the list starts to get too long here, mantras, questions. And then we have this long list too. So I think this section of the poem, it goes on too far. I think we should get rid of that. Confusion clumped like elder flowers on my synapses, ripe for the picking. The harvest, bountiful this season. Hang on. I guess I have to go like this. There we go. I need a scroll bar. Where'd I go? The harvest, bountiful this season, hung heavy in the branches, and the gatherers never gathered, all dead, withered back to nothing. So for this section, the confusion clumped. I like the confusion clumped. Anytime you get images going, it works really well. So confusion clumped like elderflowers in my synapses, ripe for the harvest, ripe for the picking. The harvest bountiful this season, hung heavy in the branches. The gatherers never gathered, all dead. So the gatherers never gathered. I feel a little lost there because I don't know who the gatherers are. It's like an addition of a new person, and that throws me off a little bit. So I'm. Because who the gatherers are, like it doesn't really answer that question, but it could just be never gathered. So like elderflowers, my synapses ripe for the picking. The harvest bountiful this season, hung heavy on the branches. Just never gathered there. I would do, and not even all dead. Withered back to nothing. What I know. So right now we're clipping out stuff that doesn't add anything to the poem and making it more streamlined is the first thing we're doing. What you don't know can't hurt you. Only it did. Blindside me, that is. No bliss in the curled up question marks connected with my solar plexus. I think the solar plexus is a little too detailed or too specific there for the tone of the poem. It's sort of the word choice, the technical nature of that doesn't really fit with the rest of the diction. So something different there, I'd say. Rotation halted mid-breath, thrown off its axis in the cosmic ditch. What do you call a spinning top with no spin? I love that line too. What do you call a spinning top with no spin? Because that gets to the heart of the poem, which is that, I don't have anything to write about, but I'm pretending. A toy, broken, useless, nothing. What do I know? And so again, this repeats it though. So I'd end on this, and we're condensing up the poem into something tighter, and I think that works a lot. I wonder, what I would like to do though is have the poem be pushed further. So I think that's a nice setup, but then it should push into something different. So. Like, where can we go with this is the real question. Because I feel like it's, the poem's not quite done. Let me go like this. Okay. So, what you don't know can't hurt you. Only it did. Blindside me, that is. No bliss in the curled up question marks connecting with my solar plexus. Rotation halted mid-breath, thrown off axis in the cosmic ditch. What do you call a spinning top with no spin? See, this is one of those things I always think of as like an early exit ramp. You know, if you're driving on the freeway and you're like, you know, you want to get something to eat, and you're hungry, and you just take the first exit you see, even though you don't want to eat McDonald's, but that's the only thing at the rest stop. You know, and so you see, I think what do you call a spinning top with no spin feels like an ending, and it's an ending that works. But there's more to the poem. Like, there's more to this journey than just that ending. And so it's really easy to see those sort of false endings where, you feel like the language feels like it could end, but the poem really could keep going. And so, there's something deeper down that's trying to come out that hasn't come out yet in this poem, is what I would say. And so how can we push this poem further is the question for me. Let me see what the comments are as we... Yeah. So Joe Parker says, I want a little story within the poem. Yeah, exactly. It needs to take a detour and go somewhere. It needs to take a turn. It doesn't really have a turn. It starts where it finishes. And it's got like an opportunity for a turn. Like where is, I don't know, where can the story come out of this poem? So Katie Doder says, maybe make the top spin somewhere instead of just spinning. That's a good idea. Yeah. Click over on YouTube, see if anybody has any suggestions. So Dick Westheimer wanted me to talk about the meaning, what I mean by diction, a little more. And I just mean, like, there's a certain mood and a certain sort of register that poems have. A certain like there's sort of like a vocabulary. Like, everybody has a speaking vocabulary, and it depends on how many words you use. I think it's like the average person has like 20,000 words they use in conversation, but like 60,000 that they recognize or something like that. And if we're writing, we tend to have a broader vocabulary. If we're in certain settings, certain contexts, like two doctors talking, we'll have a totally different vocabulary as two mechanics talking, and then if they have to talk a mechanic and a doctor, they'll sort of join and find common language. It's that kind of thing, and so that's what I mean by diction. It's like the word choice that you use, and so something like solar plexus would fit more with a doctor than a mechanic, and it would fit more with a different kind of poem. Like, there aren't words like that in this poem. That's the thing, the words in here, the sort of because you have to think of every poem as like a person, like a character. The speaker, we say the speaker because the speaker is like a character, and the character has a certain way of talking. And you sort of establish that in the early part of the poem of how the character is going to talk. And then if we have, if we go to big scientific words, or if we start swearing all of a sudden when we didn't have that kind of language. And this is a gentle, nature-bound, sort of generalized type diction to this poem. And so when we get to solar plexus, it's too technical. And that's what I mean by diction. Let's see. Gary K says, I find the parentheses in don't in the title pretentious and distracting. Good poem overall, but too many metaphors and images drain the focus of the title. Not too many metaphors and images. I think there's a good amount of those, but a poem called What I Don't Know. Yeah, we haven't talked about the title. I think the title could be more interesting, but I think the poem hasn't found itself, and so we don't really know what the title should be yet. Because I think that, there's a story that it wants to tell that it just hasn't told yet. And it's kind of ironic because it's talking about, I don't know what to write about is the topic of the poem. But but it hasn't found the thing it wants. Like, it feels like it wants to tell us something, and it hasn't told us yet. So what you don't know can't hurt you. Only it did blindside me. That is, that's the thing. It did, right here. Only it did blindside me. That is. There's something underneath that, and that's the story that wants to be told, but it's not out yet. So. No bliss in the curled up question marks connected with my solar plexus rotation halted mid-breath, thrown off axis in the cosmic ditch. What do you call a spinning top with no spin? What do you call blah, blah, blah? When I was 6, I did this. Or when I was, last night you said this. There seems to be something that sort of is driving the poem that we haven't found yet. There's like a story right there that wants to come out. That's my feeling for this poem. Let's see. In the email address again, I think I put it on the screen. Yeah, open lines, open mic. That's openmic@rattle.com. That's the open lines link for the Rattlecast. We have a whole bunch of people who sent poems in already. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. Oops, we don't want the music. Remember to turn off the music. Turn off the music. Okay. Let's go to another poem. And Ethne was the first to send one in. Let me see if I can. Let's see. It's going to take an extra second, I think, to open this because we don't have Word. So I have to go open with LibreOffice. Oh, wait, we have Word. Do we have Word? Oh, we do have Word. Oh, but I need a product key. I guess we don't have Word. All right, hang on. We will open in LibreOffice, and we'll try to make that always happen. All right. Sorry for the delays here. Just working with a new program. I got to zoom so we can actually see it. Okay, that's much better. Okay, so this is Ethne Longbottom's poem. This is Nesting in the Early Days of the War. Well, oops, we'll switch. Oops, here we go. Nesting in the Early Days of the War. Is that right? All right. I gotta shrink it even more. Is that shrinking it? Okay. Nesting in the early days of the war. Okay. Nesting in the early days of the war. Oh, come on. Ah! There we go. Shrink it more. There we go. Now we can actually see it. Okay, nesting in the early days of the war. The automated voice tells me press 1 for streetlights, 2 for council tax, 3 for bins, 4 for everything else. I press 4, listen to another list. I press 4 again. Now there's a music and waiting. Outside, the yew tree is being cleared of berries by a flurry of redwings. Their flanks flash red as they pluck berries and swallow them whole. The blackbirds fluster and swoop. Hello, can I help? I rush in. I want to offer Ukrainian family my annex. It's available, warm, free from bums. It has a garden, running water, a castle view. They let me go on and on. You'll need social care for that. I'll pop you on hold. More music, more waiting. Eventually, I am told the computers aren't working. Sorry, I can't help you. We hang up. 30 minutes have passed. I'm no further forward. Unlike the people pressing west, hoping to land somewhere before spring. I watch the blackbirds reclaim the yew's needled embrace, and I make another call. Nesting in the early days of the war. That's interesting. I wonder, automated voice. So with this poem, I'm wondering, I'm a little lost as to where we are with the poem. Because what war is it? Nesting in the early days of the war. The automated voice tells me press 1 for streetlights, 2 for council tax, 3 for bins, 4 for everything else. I press 4, listen to another list. I press 4 again. Now there's music and waiting. So there's a weird surrealness that kicks off with this poem right here. Outside, the yew tree is being cleared of berries and by a flurry of red wings. So to this point in the poem, the poem's really working for me on the level of intrigue. So I'm really curious about this. I don't know where we are. I don't know, what war it is. I don't know. And there's sort of a surrealness to this where it says 4 for everything else. And you keep pressing forward. Now there's music, but we don't know anything else about anything else. And then we switch to the outside. The yew tree is being cleared of berries by a flurry of redwings. So then we get this image. We're sort of set in our place. Their flanks flash red as they pluck berries and swallow them whole. I think swallow them whole is a bit of a cliche. And swallowing them whole doesn't really add a whole lot to the image. So I would probably cut that. The blackbirds fluster and swoop. Hello, can I help? I rush in. I want to offer Ukrainian family my annex. So then now we know that it's that war. It's the war in Ukraine. It's available, warm, free from bombs. It has a garden, running water, a castle view. They let me go on and on. So so we sort of zoom in on understanding of the place that we're in. You need social care for that. I'll pop you on hold. More music, more waiting. Eventually, I am told the computers aren't working. Sorry, I can't help you. We hang up. 30 minutes have passed. I'm no further forward, unlike the people pressing west, hoping to land somewhere for spring. I watch blackbirds reclaim the yew's needled embrace, and I make another call. So similar, I think, maybe to the last poem. I feel like this hasn't really found the full story that it wants to tell yet. And so it sort of starts out where it ends. And I'm sort of, the intrigue that sets up at the beginning, for me, it doesn't stay in a sort of a surrealness. There is a strangeness to, the press 4 for everything else. It's such an unusual thing to sort of think about and focus on. And then, the music coming on, there's sort of this like what's going to actually happen feeling. And then it sort of clarifies itself pretty quickly, and then it stays in the same place after that. And so again, I'm left wanting more from the poem. I want more story, like what happens with this, or bringing back to an old memory. It has this sort of one track, one sense of direction that it goes, and it doesn't have any shifts or deviations after that. Because the feeling of surrealness that I felt at the beginning is sort of a false lead to the poem. And so it ends up being very concrete and very set in the present. And then it doesn't really do anything surprising after that. And so where can we go? Like, what other level can we take this poem is the question. I don't know, let's see some comments. Let's see. So Brian O'Sullivan says, I thought the last line made a nice cut to nature and gave new meaning to the title. That's interesting. I watched the blackbirds reclaim the yew's needled embrace and make another call. It does. So I guess the alternative, if we want to, and I should mention this too, if we want to keep the poem sort of one focus, you can have a poem that's sort of narrowly focused on one thing, or more expansive. We could shorten the poem a lot, I think, to make it fit a little more. Let's see. And so maybe, that's why it's kind of a joke that everybody says, make it a haiku. But if you make something like this, like that short, it can work in a one way. And I think that the nature and the turning back can do it. Let's see. So Brian Sullivan find this. I thought there was maybe it's to me it was the not knowing, like I was saying before, not knowing what war it is, because it just says the war, and then I don't know, that's where my mind went with the poem. and maybe it shouldn't have, but that's where it did. And until you get to the Ukraine, then it sort of set it into place. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, exactly. So Sharon Friday already said haiku over there, I think, before I said it. I think a contrast between, this is Jenny Middleton, I think a contrast between humanity and the encounter of the automated voices getting in the way could be developed. There is a poem I could share. Let's see. That just reminds me very clearly of, it's a very different poem than this. This is one of the poems from the Best of Rattle issue, and it's one of the most popular poems of all time. And it has this. So compare the difference between this poem, Telemarketer by Brett Garcia Myron, and Ethne's poem. So it has this extra this sense of story in it, and a connection with the speaker. So maybe that's one place we can go. That the hello, how can I help? You'll need this. I'll pop you on hold again. Like there's so much more to add there, that we can have some kind of connection with a person. We can have sort of amped up this sort of merry-go-round feeling of going through this phone tree. And it is interesting too. It's a phone tree. That's what you call that. And then the birds are in the tree, so we could highlight that more maybe during the process. But let's take a look at this this poem by Brett Myron. This is Telemarketer from Rattle number 25, and see how it moves through a phone call. But makes it turns into a little story within the phone call. And that's kind of what we're missing, is some kind of feeling of a story with motion. So here's Brett Myron's poem, Telemarketer. I'm reading on the couch when she calls and asks for me by name. I smile at her scripted intimacy, imagine her cubicle with photos of pets, the long bend of light on her lacquered nails. Listen to this, I reply. David kissed the soft inner banks of women's thighs. Pardon? Oh, there's more, I say, thighs like loamy earth that cup the rivers, or lilies blooming in rose and mint. Is it a bad time for you, sir? Is it for you? Tell me something, I insist. Tell me anything. A quiet unfolds between us, as though we'd spent our breath on withered arguments or lost in the scented air of sweat. Finally, she says, I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. Outside leaves are turning in the cold. So do you see the sense of motion there? It's a telemarketer calling, so the phone call is in the opposite, and he's kind of messing with the telemarketer by reading what he's reading, or reading out loud what he's reading. But then it turns into this human connection that they have. So there's this whole little story in that poem, even though it's about the same length, and so that's what we kind of have to turn up somehow in this poem. Some kind of sense of story going on, other than just this phone call, and the birds outside. It needs some kind of arc, some kind of movement to it, and that's what's missing. Otherwise, there's some great lines that I really like a lot. It's just a matter of finding the way that the poem can move, if that makes sense. Hope it does. Let's go back here. So yeah. So how could we do that? The automated voice tells me to press 1 for streetlights, 2 for council tax, 3 for bins, 4 for everything else. I press 4, listen to another list, press 4 again. Now there's music and waiting. Outside the yew tree is being cleared of berries by a flurry of redwings. Their flanks flash red as they pluck berries. The blackbirds fluster and swoop. And so I think maybe what I'm really wanting is more sort of more sense of frustration with this phone tree merry-go-round that we do when things are, there's a war going on, of course. And so when we're doing this sort of song and dance for no reason, and that's really the emotional heart of the poem, but we don't get a whole sense of that. And so I think it's this section here. I do like the end. It's this section here that needs more of a sense of drama and like frustration in the being on hold, the nature of that, and maybe some connection with the people more. The fact that you'll need social care for that, I'll pop you on hold, and then more music and waiting. That's not like there's no frustration there. There's no, and I'm told the computer's not working. Sorry, I can't help you. There's no sort of play like drama in it. and I think we just need to turn up this into something that has a little more emotional weight, and then we can go back to the birds at the end, and it's a great finish. So I think that, oops, we didn't want to delete it, but let's see, how do we go? Undo, edit, undo. Yeah, it should be still Control D. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we don't want to leave that, but we want to make that have some kind of emotional weight, some kind of like frustration, and maybe some kind of mutual frustration, or some more interaction with the person. The person doesn't really seem that it's entering the phone doesn't seem like much of a character, whereas in the other poem, Telemarketer by Brett Myron, both characters had a lot of life to them, and I think that's what I'm missing in this poem, just more of that story. Okay, let's see. Yeah. Yeah, and so Mark Grinder says he's calling the wrong office and gets lost in the bureaucracy. Could something be made of that? Using the blackbirds, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, there's so much to go on here when it comes to that sense of frustration that I think we all feel, but it doesn't come out. So I think we need to just turn up that sort of, make a story out of that middle section so that we can feel the drama of it. Let me see. Erica Goodkind says, I love how the pressing forward set against the people pressing west. That's a great use of that word, too. I totally agree. And what number can the people press to end the war? Yeah, there's a real good poem in here. It just needs to turn up the drama, or turn up the surprise, or something unexpected. Yeah. Okay. Jenny Milton says, I think the contrast between humanity and the encounter of the automated voice is getting in the way could be developed. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I got to eventually. Thanks for saying that early, Jenny. I missed that, or I could have gotten a little shorter. Okay. Let's go on to another poem. Next up we have... let's see. Okay, this one I'll just paste in here, make it easier. Again, I'm sorry we have those dots. Oops, hang on. Get that a little more there too. Okay, sorry we have these spaces. I can't figure out how to delete them. And this poem is by Catherine Patton. Catherine Patton didn't have any other comments, but When You Subtract Tom is the poem for right now by Catherine Patton once again. When you subtract Tom. What is left? His waffle iron, his laser printer, a safe full of the silver he bought high equals... Oops, did I add that? Oh, no, I didn't. All right, I thought I added that. A safe full of the silver he bought high equals failure plus debt plus despair. Take one big life, subtract everything with one small bullet. What's left over? 3 cats, a queen mattress, 2 bikes, some ashes, an assortment of mixing bowls, 39 years plus 1 millisecond for a bullet to travel down the barrel, hit bone and brain equals memories plus regret, plus anger, plus immortal sin, plus Catholic shame, plus no memorial. What is the remainder years later? A habit of hiking the trail on September 25th to the spot. A beautiful place, he said in his suicide text. Broken hearts plus a collection of his possessions plus blasted dreams equals the value of our love that wasn't enough to equal one life. It's a very touching poem here when you subtract Tom. The first thing that comes to mind is I think it makes it hard to read with all the pluses and the equals. And so I think the poem would be better served if just we did, I don't think I can I do a find and replace? And how do I do a find and replace? If we just found and replaced if we wrote them out, it would just work better. because it ends up a little hard to read as all the pluses and the minuses and stuff, and it sort of takes you out of the poem. It makes it sort of a text thing instead of like a voice thing. So it takes you out of the voice when you have that. I'm trying to think. There's a poem that it's on the tip of my tongue that we didn't rattle that sort of worked that way and was playing with that, but I can't remember it right now. So the first thing I would do is cut back those. I won't go through and do it with all of them, but I think just if we just had the spell at the plus, it would make the reading more, and it wouldn't be a distraction, and we'd still get the same content. And so I think I'd really quickly do that first of all. When you subtract Tom, take a look again. Yeah, so Shared Fronte and Mary Lisa both agree with that. And it's true. What it does is it makes you think about the poems as a words on the page instead of as the voice in becoming you, which is what you're trying to do. And so we want to live the poem. We want the poem to be embodied in us. And when we're like, that's really why we were talking on the poetry space yesterday about concrete poems. Is part of this like idea of how do you plate a poem. And the problem with concrete poems is that it distracts from the actual experience of the poem becoming embodied in you, using the voice of the speaker, using your body like they're playing an instrument. When you focus your attention becomes the actual page and the shape of the things on the page, then it's harder to get into that space. And so it's like you can't really get into a movie when you're like having a conversation with somebody. You sort of have to lose yourself in it. And you're trying to lose yourself in a poem most of the time. And so anytime that the attention is more drawn to the actual page and the shape and the character, the shape of the characters on the page, that detracts from your ability to enter the poem in that way, or have the poem enter you more precisely. So anyway, when you subtract Tom, a great title. I definitely love that. And how it plays out too in the poem works really well. What is left? His waffle iron, his laser printer, and great details here. Really love that, the way the whole poem, the title and then moving into the first line works really well. What is left? His waffle iron, his laser printer. I mean, imagine if it was just his iron, his printer. The waffle iron and the printer, those details really add a lot to the feeling of the poem. A safe full of the silver he bought high equals failure, plus debt, plus despair. I'd say oops, one minute. We want to go over here. I'd say for this part, I think this is a little too much to start. A safe full of the silver he bought high equals failure. I would take that out, without the debt and despair. Just to sort of ease us into this listing of addition and subtraction. Like, make it feel like this was a spontaneous thing that the speaker just came up with on the spot. Like, I'm going to start doing this metaphor now. Because the safe full of the silver he bought high equals failure. That should be equals failure. And then it occurs to me to sort of add things up in this way. Because then if you do that makes this next line much more powerful. Take one big life, I'd say, and subtract everything. And also the line breaks here. See how I'm doing this? Put the bullet on the next line to add that tension there. So feel how much better that works. A safe full of the silver he bought high equals failure. Take one big life and subtract everything with one small bullet. And so so the drama builds up with this line break in the and then what's left over? 3 cats, a queen mattress, and we get back to the list, which the list is very visual and feels intimate because we're talking about his stuff that he left behind. A queen mattress, 2 bikes, some ashes, an assortment of mixing bowls. Again, I love the assortment of mixing bowls too. There's a nice sound to it, and there's also just the attention to detail is nice too, like that you notice and point something out. 39 years plus 1 millisecond. Again, I do the plus. For the bullet to travel down the barrel, hit bone and brain, equals memories plus regret plus anger plus mortal sin. And add the pluses. I'm not going to do it. Plus shame, plus Catholic shame, plus no memorial. What is the remainder years later? And again, we shift. I think it's a great line here. What is the remainder years later? So I think that works really well too, because it's one of those simple statements that makes you think, and sort of you can feel the poem building up energy and then sort of slowing down and releasing it, and sort of letting you settle on that line. So it's a really nicely written line. A habit of hiking the trail on September 25th to the spot. I think September 25th. So some details add to our sense of the specificity, like the waffle iron was great, the laser printer, those little details but September 25th is sort of too, like when you come across a detail like that, you feel like you're supposed to remember it. And so, like, it makes it seem like an important detail. Whereas it's actually not. It doesn't actually contain a lot of emotion that it's that specific day. And so you're sort of asking the reader to invest in that detail without any sort of payoff or load being bared on that detail, if that makes sense. And so I think it'd be better off not naming the date here, because for the reader, which day it is doesn't matter, only that it's a specific day. So I think a habit of hiking the trail on the same... Oops. Let's see if we can do this. On the same day. The same spot. Something like that. Where we still, we point out that it's a precise place, but we don't name it. Because then if you name it, we have to sort of hold it in our head. And we only want to hold things that have emotional weight in our head. Or maybe you might have to say that same day every year, something like that, to make it make sense. But you know what I'm getting at. The same day, the same spot, a beautiful place, he said in his suicide text. And instead of suicide, I think we already mentioned suicide before, right? Or did we just imply it? I guess we haven't actually said it yet. But we've implied it so strongly that I think we all know, what happened to Tom. And so, oops. Oh, what did I do now? All right. So I think we know, we know what happened to Tom. I think I'd tone that down a little bit too, with something like, just his last text, and let that be a little more understated, and let us, because there's this relationship that's like a dance, and you want to let the reader be involved a little bit with the dance. And so we'll get a little sense of satisfaction when we say, oh, suicide, if we say in his last text. And so, he said in his last text, broken hearts plus collection of his possessions plus blasted dreams equals the value of our love that wasn't enough to equal one life. And I'm not sure to equal one life. I think the equal one life might be pushing hard too. I'd probably end it there. So this is a good poem, I think, that just needed some tweaks and some little condension. But I think that works pretty well. Let's see. Oh, Jerry Steffen says maybe anniversary date is a way to put that date up there. But yeah, so I think this is a poem that's really, I think it's got a great title. It leads us in. It has an emotional weight to it that we can really appreciate. So I think it works really well just with those little edits. So this is a poem that I wouldn't have to do much more with. Mark Ritter says the weight of the September 25th date is created as you realize it is a date on which the memory is recalled repeatedly. And he disagrees about just removing the word suicide. I don't know. I think you have to, you have to let the reader participate a little bit in order, because what we're trying to do, we already talked about this on earlier in this episode, but you're trying to build this sense of becoming, the poem entering you and you becoming the speaker. That's where the emotional power of poetry lives, is when the poem is embodied in you. The speaker's breath becomes your breath. And that's why they're such great empathy machines, poems, because we are the medium. Our own breath is the medium that the thing is written on. We're like the canvas for the painting, which is something that you can't do in any other type of art. And so in a way to nudge that along, because that's where the real emotional connection comes in, is when we embody the speaker's voice. And you can nudge it along in certain ways. And one of the ways you can nudge it along is by letting the reader participate. And so you have to sort of navigate your way through how much do I need to tell and how much can I hold back in order to encourage participation. And so I think that, not saying suicide note, even though it's really obvious, allows us to come to that conclusion ourselves, which allows us to feel part of the poem instead of feeling like the poem's being spoken at us. We want to be speaking. We want to be the one speaking, not have the poem be spoken at us. And so anytime you can have a chance to let the reader participate, it's a good thing to do and take advantage of. And so I think, so that's why I think you should both the date. Well, the date's a little different reason, but it's similar, because the date was asking somebody. It's something that when we see a date, we automatically try to remember it. And maybe it's just because we had to in school, but when you see a date, you automatically try to remember it. And so unless we need to know that it's that specific date, focusing our attention on that in a similar way to focusing on the typography distracts from the poem. It distracts sort of mental resources. We only have so much RAM as a brain, as a sort of fleshy computer. And so we have to be careful of how much RAM you're asking the reader to use. And it's a useless sort of code as far as the reader is concerned, even though it means a lot that it's that specific date to the person. What matters is that there's a date every year that we go to this spot. And so if we can say that and we get that across without having to make us remember, I mean, it's a small thing, but it makes the poem more powerful if we do that. Okay, so any really comments to pass along? Hannah Mahoney says Broken Hearts. Did I get over Broken Hearts and not even mention it? Yeah, I guess I did. Yeah, I do agree. And I don't know how. I was just thinking about other stuff, I guess. But I do think the Broken Hearts is a little too pat. Yeah, I agree with that. How could you say that in a new way? That's always a question that you should ask, and I'm not sure. I can't generate it, but something other than Broken Hearts would be much better there, because the details. I mean, the details like the waffle iron and things like that have a lot more weight than something like Broken Hearts, which is a bit of a cliche. Not even a bit; it's a big cliche. So can you find something there? Even just like Broken Memories. Would be a little better, because that's at least a little bit different. Because we already have that sense of loss. We felt that through, and then the last line's coming and really hammering it home as well. So we don't need the broken hearts. So maybe something different there. Okay, I got to move on, because this is we always want to do. I call it lightning round, but it doesn't really work as lightning. Okay. So let's move on to another poem. And again, it's too late. I always think that I'm going to get through like all these really fast, but it's so fun to talk about poems. I just keep talking. Okay. Mark Grinier's up next with Thanksgiving. And I'm going to open up here, and then we got to switch this to this one. Thanksgiving. This is Mark Grinier's poem, Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving 2022. Okay, one more sip. Thanksgiving 2022. And again, this is Mark Grinier's poem. Dark-eyed juncos jink and hop from wall to branch to fence and up to the empty feeder above my yard. I watch them chattering as they search back and forth, filling their bills with what remains of the last big birdseed bag I bought. Thanksgiving Day may have come today, but inflation's high and we cannot afford another big bag to feed them with. So tomorrow they'll find less easy fare to fill their crops and keep them warm on this winter stop in their annual flight from northwest rain to southwest drought. As I tighten my belt for the coming months, I guess they'll benefit, no doubt, from getting by without my help, from striving to find their natural path through winter floods and summer droughts, without a plan, without a thought for times, without inflation's cost. So Thanksgiving 2022, there's a nice rhythm to it that feels very metrical and sort of formal, even though it's very free, it's free verse, but I think you'd call it like free verse in the actual free, verse that's free sense, rather than just prose with line breaks, as people like to complain. Thanksgiving 2022. I love a lot of the language and the sounds of it. That's the highlight of the poem for me. There's just great sounds throughout. Dark-eyed juncos, jink and hop. I love that jink is a great word. You don't see that word very often, and it's so evocative too. It's a great word to use. Dark-eyed, and then we get the juncos jinking, so the J's, and hop from wall to branch to fence and up to the empty feeder above my yard. So great sounds in that first, great rhythm too in that first sentence, those first three lines. I watch them chattering as they search back and forth, filling their bills with what remains of last, and the bills, of course, has a double entendre there, with what remains of the last big birdseed bag. I think I bought is one too many, a little too much of the alliteration. The big birdseed bag I bought it's a little too much. Again, this is, I guess, the theme of the day, but we're talking about things that distract from your sense of becoming inhabited by the poem. And so anytime that you notice the poet doing a little too much, like you want it to feel, that's why you want it to feel really natural, is because if it feels natural, you're not distracted by the fact that a poet wrote this and is trying to sort of, I wouldn't say manipulate you, but that's what really you're trying to do in a good way, is manipulate us into feeling. And so if you have anything where the poet shows itself, then that detracts from that task, which is to make us sort of forget that we're ourselves for a moment and think we're someone else. And so I think big birdseed bag is great, but what was it there before? I bought was just too much, even though the bought is important. Given the nature of the subject matter of inflation. But we can come to that later, and we do. So Thanksgiving Day may have come today, but inflation's... I think Thanksgiving Day may have come today is another one of those things where it's too emphasized. The sound is too emphasized, and it gets distraction. Thanksgiving may have come today, but inflation's high, and we cannot afford another big bag to feed them with. So tomorrow they'll find less easy fare to fill their crops and keep them warm on this winter stop. So we got the crop stop. I think it goes a little too far again here, because there's not a whole lot of content added in these last few lines. It does have a symmetrical feel to the poem, but I think it just doesn't have as much as we need. Like, it repeats itself. So Thanksgiving may have come today, but inflation's high, and we cannot afford another big bag to feed them with. And I take out the with too. And then I think I take out the so, and let it slow down and just let that stand on its own. Tomorrow they'll find less easy fare. And I think we don't need this. It just sort of repeats itself, and it has that music, but it's like overly musical. So I'd cut that out. As I tighten my belt for the coming months, I guess they'll benefit, no doubt. The belt doubt is a nice slant rhyme. As I tighten my belt for the coming months, I guess they'll benefit, no doubt, from getting by without my help. From striving to find their natural path through winter floods and summer droughts without a plan, without a thought for times, without inflation's cost. And again, I think this goes too far. I think the poem is just has too much of that. There's the great sound, but there's too much of it. I think you let it sit. And as I tighten my belt for the coming months, so we get the metaphor. Like, we know that the bird has to cut back because we have to cut back, and we're all going to try to figure out our way through navigating the migration despite fewer resources. We get that concept, we get the comparison. So I think that, as I tighten my belt for the coming months, I guess they'll benefit, no doubt, from getting by without my help, from striving to find their natural path through winter floods and summer droughts without a plan, without a thought for times without inflation's cost. So I think it's really just this last line. I would do something different. Summer droughts, winter floods, and summer droughts without a plan. It feels kind of summarizey too. And I kind of want to find a way to end it just a little earlier. What did I do? Let's see. Does that work? Yeah. So I want to end this just a little earlier. And how do I do that? As I tighten my belt for coming months, I guess I'll benefit. And I think maybe the no doubt, even though I pointed it out as a nice, I think it might be too much too. It's one of those things, they say kill your darlings, and it can be the sound play is nice, but we can't let it become distracting. We have to have it be like always a positive, and I think it might be too much because we also have the belt and the help as a slant rhyme too, and so it's like two slant rhymes off that one help. I guess they'll benefit from getting by, the comma, from getting by without my help, from striving to find their natural path. I wonder if we could just end with the droughts. Does that sound nice? As I tighten my belt for the coming months, I guess they'll benefit from getting by without my help, from striving to find their natural path through winter floods and summer drought. And we get the belt, help, droughts are all slant rhymes. And so that kind of has a nice feel to it. And since it's a musically driven poem, that's really nice, but it's a little more understated. Yeah, I think that, and this is a poem, unlike some other poems that we talked to earlier, that it doesn't feel like it wants to tell us more. I think that it has like a sonnet, and it's a sort of a sonnet shape. I wonder if we could make it a sonnet. That's one of the things that I did think, like some kind of, even just an American sonnet. It has that kind of feel where it has like an argument that it sets up and it's sharing something in a concise way that's sort of small enough you can hold in your head. And I think, and the sound is enough to propel it forward. So I think it works at this length. It's not the kind of poem where I would say make it longer and find more story to it. So there's that. Let me see. Yeah, Andrea Dopricus would say would stop without a plan. And that's another thing you could do too. Because you have the path to, and we want to focus on the music, because the music is what's really beautiful about this poem. And so we could put the without a plan black, because we have the path and plan, so that sort of feels like musical too. As I tighten my belt for the coming months, I guess they'll benefit from getting by without my help, from striving to find their natural path through winter floods and summer droughts without a plan. That's a little more understated because it's even more of a divergence in the slant. It's a really far drift from that to that, even though it's still there. The drought and help is sort of set up a little more strong, even though that's pretty far slant rhyme too. So it depends how far. I don't know what feels better. Let's see. Kit Patton points out the first stanza says the theater is empty, but they're still filling their bills, running empty instead, which sounds like it's going to soon be empty. And then the rest of the poem happens. That's a good point that I didn't notice. Yeah, dark-eyed junkos jink and hop from wall to wall, from wall to branch to fence and up to the empty. So it should be almost empty feeder or something like that. I watch them chittering as they search back and forth, filling their bills with what remains. Yeah, so there is a little bit that remains. And so, yeah, I didn't notice that, but it's true. Dick Westheimer says some final image would help. Or maybe a Duffy's Farm sort of statement. Well, I think there kind of is that in the poem, because we have it's set up, and I should have talked about this more too. It's set up as if it's going to be like nothing but bad, but for the birds, it's actually a benefit to them. So there is that turn in the poem. I should have mentioned that when I was talking about the sonnet nature of the poem. But it's set up as if this is going to be bad. How are they going to survive? It's going to be a struggle with, the inflation, and it's a sort of cascade of how inflation's affecting even the birds. And I'm having trouble tightening my belt. But then I guess they'll benefit from getting by. And I guess is really nice too, because it's sort of telling myself, well, I'll get by too, and maybe I'll be better off because I'll become more resourceful, because the birds are becoming more resourceful. And I think that's kind of there in a subtle way. But Dick says, or maybe a discovery about how the birds would be better off without us. Well, not without us. I think the birds are. That's kind of what it is. That's what it's saying, Dick, is that the birds are better off. Like what's going on is the birds are sort of used to being like having us to rely on, and now they don't. So they'll be more bird-like and resourceful as they get by, without a plan, without this sort of easy meal. And so that's what the poem's really saying, and it's saying it in a more subtle way than Duffy's Farm, which is like, I have wasted my life. That kind of, straightforward, chunky turn. But, but I think it works. And so Dick does say it would be great if the wonderful language at the beginning reappeared at the end. There's those, the dark-eyed juncos hop, or the jink and hop, that jink and hop from wall to branch to fence. I don't know, is there a way we could... Yeah, I mean, winter floods and summer droughts are doing the same sort of contextual work as the birds jinking and hopping, and yet they don't have the same specific detail as an imagery. So maybe you could add it there, but I don't know. I think the poem works like this. I wouldn't do much more with it than what we just did. Okay. Let's do one more, and then I gotta run. And sorry that every time I do a lightning round, maybe I shouldn't call it. Maybe I should just call it open critique or something instead of lightning round, because I linger too much. It's just too fun to talk about poems. I would just do this all day if I had all day. Okay, let's go next to the next person who sent one in, which is I'm trying to remember who we did last time to get somebody we haven't for sure. And let's do Lisa Seidenberg, because I don't think we've ever done one by Lisa Seidenberg before. So let's do this. Okay, this is Lisa Seidenberg, and the poem is Oedipus in Suburbia. And anytime there's Oedipus or one of these things, I have to really quickly look up who that is. There's the Oedipus complex and stuff like that. What is Oedipus? The Greek, I can't keep track of the Greeks. I'm sorry, I just can't. So Oedipus means swollen foot, was a mythical Greek king of Thebes, a tragic hero in Greek mythology. He accidentally fulfilled a prophecy that he would end up killing his father and marrying his mother, thereby bringing disaster to his city and family. Okay, so that's the story. I can never keep him straight. So that's Oedipus. He's going to marry his father, or kill his father, marry his mother, and then there's the Oedipus syndrome is because of that. That makes sense. So maybe that's one I should remember, because I know what the Oedipus complex is. The story of Oedipus is the subject of Sophocles' tragedy Oedipus Rex, which is followed by the narrative. Anyway. Okay, so now we know, or at least I know, you probably already did, Oedipus in Suburbia, so we know the context of this poem. And this is one of those things, I know I'm terrible at this. And so I, even if I'm just reading a submission, if the first couple lines are good in a poem, and it mentions a Greek character, I go and Google and read the Wikipedia, because I can't keep track of Greek mythology. I just can't. It's so many years, so many poems, and I still can't keep track of any of these people. I don't know why. Anyway, Oedipus in Suburbia. So much excitement, and on a school night, I heard the pop pop. Figured it came from a cop show on TV, but then the sirens wail. The sheriff's car pulled up next door with roof beacons flashing. I was the only one who knew the reason Joey shot his father on that night in January. No one asked me. I carried that secret for decades. I still carry it. My dad said, that's what you get for having guns in the house. That January night was memorable as my birthday was 2 days later, same as Joey's, years before, when we still played together. I learned what happened to his missing finger, something to do with a shovel. Joey's dad filled closets with guns. Years later, we saw his widow and Joey's sister at a fine Italian restaurant. They wore long, showy furs and huge shawl collars. It wasn't winter. His father had a violent temper. Neighbors know more than you think. My dad said there are no new stories, only new people living out the old ones. I turned 14 2 days after January night, and Joey would be 16. An adult in the eyes of the law. Smart move. He got off with 2 years in juvenile, and his mom and sister got new coats. So this Oedipus in Suburbia, I like the concept of, I love that line about there are no new stories, only new people living out the old ones. I think that works really great. It's a great point, and it really fits well, again, with the title too. Oedipus in Suburbia, how these stories do repeat, Joseph Campbell and all that. So much excitement on a school night. I heard the pop, figured it came from a cop show on TV. Nice sounds, the pop and the cop. We need some kind of punctuation. It's missing punctuation in a lot of places, which make it a little harder to read than it should be. Figured it came from a cop show on TV. But then the sirens wail, and sheriff cars pulled up next door with roof beacons flashing. And so 3 lines to get to this. I think that could be condensed. We don't need to stretch that out for 3 lines. The whole poem is the kind of poem that could be. There's a lot of unnecessary things that don't have a lot of emotional weight that can be condensed into shorter lines. So that's the main thing, I think, with this poem, which is something we do. You notice we do that with almost every poem. There's always stuff that you can cut, or almost always stuff to cut. We just write too much and then have to pull it back so often, and that's why people edit. That's the revision process. Often is just finding the things that you don't need because you want to get to the story as fast and as powerfully as possible. There's the concept that I mentioned this before, but Elvin Lau, who is a slam poet, friend of mine, used to say he wanted to have the highest density of emotion or engagement or content, the highest density of content per word was his goal in writing a poem. And so he wanted to have every line, if you could make it someone laugh and then gasp in the same line, that's what he wanted to do with a slam poem. And the same thing applies to page poems too. And we want to have them as dense as possible because that's where the power comes from, is condensing it down and getting the emotion out really in that tight way. So I think this, but then, so what's the best detail? When you see a thing that's like 3 lines that really only needs to be 1, what's the best detail? I think maybe the roof beacons flashing. So what if but then the cars pull up. We don't need next door, but then the cars pulled up, roof beacons flashing. And then you need a punctuation here too. But see how much that says the same thing? We get the exact same image, but we get it much quicker. I was the only one who knew the reason Joey shot his father on that night in January. We don't need, again, similar to the date in that poem 2 poems ago that was September 25th. See, I remember that it was September 25th. I don't need to know that. I don't need to know that the month was January. It matters to you, but it's not a piece of detail that has an emotional significance to me, unless it comes up in the poem, and there's a reason why it has to be January. But that wasn't the case. So it's an unnecessary thing you're asking me to remember by having it be precise. And when we talk about how precision is great in images, it's because those images force you to remember the scene. Like, that's why having precise, concrete details in an image is really important, because they build and sort of make the scene memorable. But details, it's like trying to remember the date of like some battle in the Civil War for history class. Like, we don't need that. We don't really need to know that. We don't want to know that, but you're asking us to remember it anyway. And so we don't need to know that it was January. And even that Joey shot his father, I wonder if we could let that linger longer and just leave it. I was the only one who knew the reason. Because that makes me want to... You know the reason. You're saying you know it, and you're going to tell me. That makes me want to engage with the poem. No one asked me. I carried that secret for decades. I still carry it. Let's see. How could we... could we pull up Joey? We get back to Joey later. And so we can sort of let that hang there. Let's see. So I think this we can condense to the... I'm not sure how... I mean, the no one asked me is great. I was the only one who knew the reason. No one asked me. I think maybe I'd just do that. My dad said, maybe just dad said, because my dad is sort of a little more distance, adding the pronoun there. My dad said, but just dad said. That's what you get for having guns in the house. Lets us stay in the moment a little bit more of hearing the thing, seeing the sirens, dad saying that, but no one asked me, all sort of scrambled together. So I think the cutting the "my" helps a lot, actually. That January night was memorable. And again, there's no reason we need to know it's January unless it's like it comes up that that's significant, but I don't think it did. And we know the night's... I mean, how is it not going to be memorable? So that whole line doesn't really give us anything. As my birthday was 2 days later. So, so the thing that matters is that my birthday was 2 days later. And it doesn't matter that it was January, because I don't care when your birthday was. And so we can say, let's see, 2 nights before my birthday, the same as Joey's. So, and then we get the same content. We get the emotional weight without the extra detail that's unnecessary. So, let's see. Yeah. I'm not going to actually change it, but that's the kind of thing you want to do. Just get find the thing that the actual emotion lives in and give us those details if they're not images. If they're images, give us as much detail as you can and let us sort of, again, as condensed and tight as possible. But yeah. But if they're just facts, only give the ones that are emotionally relevant and powerful. And so the fact here that matters is that my birthday is the same as Joey's, and it was right before his birthday. And so get that out, but the rest of it we don't need. Years before, when we still played together, I learned what happened to his missing finger, something to do with a shovel. And so that's a striking thing to say. His missing finger, something to do with a shovel. Gosh. And so that's a powerful image, especially the way it ends on the shovel, which is, we were talking in a different poem about how letting the reader participate makes something more powerful, and not saying what actually happened with the shovel, but saying missing finger and then leaving on the image of the shovel, forces us to think about that. And that's like a gruesome, bad thing to think about, but in a way that makes the poem so much more emotionally powerful because, it's a really intense detail. And so we linger on that image too. So that's great to end with a shovel there because it's, we're trying to get through a tough subject here in this poem. And so you make it as tough as possible. Joey's dad filled closets with guns. A year later, we saw his widow and Joey's sister at a fine Italian restaurant. They were long, showy furs with huge shawl collars. It wasn't winter. So this detail kind of confused me a little bit in that I felt the it wasn't winter felt like it was talking about covering up bruises or something, and because it wasn't winter, that fact. So I'm not sure where to place that. It takes me another, because then the next line is his father had a violent temper. His father's already dead, isn't he? I mean, it's their widow. So his father had a violent temper. Neighbors know more than you think. Dad said there are no new stories. Again, I do the dad said. I turned 14 2 days after January night, and Joey would be 16. An adult in the eyes of the law. Smart move. He got off with 2 years in juvenile, and his mom and sister got new coats. And so again, the fact that it was 2 days before his birthday comes back again too. So how can we condense this? We want to condense this a little bit too, and I'm not sure we need that it wasn't winter or the violent temper, because I think that throws you in a different direction. It feels a little confusing. But the neighbors know more than you think. Then Dad said there are no new stories, and maybe we could end that. But we get to know at the end that it's premeditated, which is an interesting fact. Okay, well, let's see. Let's wrap it up by seeing what everybody else is saying about it. So Kit Patton said, do we need the birthday lines? We do, because of where it goes. But what we don't need to know is that it's January and not February or March. It doesn't matter what month it is. We just know it's the birthdays are right around then. Let's see. Yeah, and Kit Patton says, I like to figure out myself how they got new coats at the end. But one of the things that, yeah, I agree. And one of the things we talk about, how important it is to build trust in the poet as a reader. Like, you encounter a poem, you want to trust, and that's why we talked about plating poems on the Poetry Space yesterday. And the reason why you want to have that presentation, like Everything Matters, is so that we can trust that all the details we're given in the poem are going to matter. And if we can build a sense of trust, then you can say they got new coats, and we'll just wonder, well, no, that's significant that they got new coats, and we'll be able to apply that, like Kit Patton was saying. And I think that, I think that's pulled off here if we do it right and carefully. And I like the line. So how do we? Yeah. Well, anyway, I can't keep going because I got to get going. I have another board meeting that I have to go to for the arts festival we're doing. Yeah, and Mark Gunner says the timeline in the poem is confused a bit by the year later stanza. Yeah, see, there's not even a reason for us. It's a great example of the January is not necessary. The year later is not necessary too. Like it's forcing us to do like math in our heads and sort of build a timeline when we really don't need it, and there's no emotional weight there. And so strip out the stuff that there's no emotional weight. Strip out the fact that it was January. Strip out it doesn't need to be a year later. It can be. He ended up with 2 years in juvie, and they're on their own with their fur coats and things like that. But we don't need to know it's exactly a year later. We know he's still in juvie. And he's about to get out, but we don't need to know that in the timeline. You don't need to ask us to build a timeline. All you're asking us to do is feel the emotion that you're feeling and trying to share with us. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I think that might wrap it up. Let me look at the Facebook. Yeah, and Margaret Doyle. Yeah, so I would cut that too. Did I cut that yet? Because yeah, I think I already cut that. That the dad didn't. We didn't need to be told that the dad had a violent temper. Yeah. Okay. I think that's gonna wrap it up. So that's it for the show. Thanks everybody for joining me from the off-site location. I think it worked out pretty well. I got to get used to the screen and things like that, but I think it'll be fine. Now, that is the critique for this week. I think next week we'll not take any more, but I think what I'll do is put the poems that were submitted here, because we have a whole bunch more to do. I'll put the poems that we submitted in a separate folder. So we have Jayanthi Rangan, Mary Lisa had one, Brian O'Sullivan had one, Monica Douglas had one, Susan Talley, Clayton Clark. And so that's going to be enough for a full show, I think. So maybe if you want to do in the next hour, so I know you're watching this right now, if you want to add your own poem for next week in the next hour, email me again at openmic, that's openmic@rattle.com. And we'll do critiques of the poems we didn't get to this week, next week, and that'll fill up a show. We won't do any more. And then we'll go back to the submissions for the week after that. I'll be in my another new location, I think, next week, but it'll be my own computer. So anyway, that is the critique for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope everybody who's had their work critiqued got something out of it. That's always the goal. We're all only trying to help. So, let's see. Next week on the Rattlecast, the guest is going to be Michael Favala Goldman. He was a poet I interviewed for Rattle number 77, the Tribute to Translation issue. He's a big translator of Danish poets and novelists, or memoirists. So I think even to the point where one was on the New York Times bestseller list, won a whole bunch of awards. His translations of, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but he has a new book of his own poems out called This May Sound Familiar. So we're going to share poems from there, talk about translating a little bit more, maybe a few translations too, I think he mentioned sending. That's going to be Rattlecast number 193. The prompt for the week was two. Someone's probably going to get it before me. It was to, find a photograph at least 100 years old that includes a person. Write a poem as a letter to that person. So that is the prompt for this week. Then we'll have the guest, Michael Favala Goldman, Rattlecast number 193, Monday, May 8th, regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.